when pain leaves in the body. And her name is Preeti Bath, and she wrote an amazing book, and she's also a somatic counselor. So how are you, Preeti?
I'm good. I'm good. Thank you for asking and thank you for having me.
And thank you for joining our podcast today and being on our book club. And this is just an avenue for us to get amazing authors out there and people to learn from experts. So, do you want to start and tell us what you do? What is your work? What does it encompass?
Yeah, absolutely. So like you said, I'm a somatic trauma therapist. I think a lot of people don't know necessarily what somatic means in that respect. So it's just more of a body-based approach to working with trauma. So normally we think of when we think of therapy, we think of conventional talking therapy,
Mhm.
and somatic trauma really looks at what's happening in your body. So most of what I do is trauma informed somatic therapy. I do also write training courses and books. That's where this is all come about, just to make this information just more accessible to people that might not be able to afford long-term therapy or they're unsure about therapy. So yeah, it's a combination of client work and training at the moment.
Okay, amazing. And do you want to tell us what led you to writing about this subject? What inspired the book?
Yeah, absolutely. So, when I was doing my therapy training, in the UK, you can train to become a therapist without having very much trauma knowledge,
Okay.
which I think is like a fault in the system, in the training system overall. So, when I was doing my further studies and I learned about trauma and how it works in the body, it was just such a change in my perspective of working. And then essentially this came through my client work. So I was doing a lot of work with clients that had chronic illnesses, so inflammation within the body, and they'd hit a wall with their treatment plan. So they'd had medication for years, they'd had physio. The missing part was trauma therapy. So they'd had some type of therapy, but what was happening was that they'd reached the maximum dosage of their medication, and really they'd been advised to just learn to live with the condition.
Mm-hmm.
And what we were doing was a more holistic approach of they were doing everything with they're taking their medication, they're doing their physio. But what was interesting is every single one of my clients had a trauma history. They had had traumatic experiences that had not been acknowledged. And when that was being flared up within their nervous system, it was obviously making the physical symptoms worse. So processing that was life changing for them. It changed how they managed their conditions. And I was honestly just repeating the same thing again and again and again. And I kept getting the feedback, this needs to be in a book, this needs to be somewhere. And I just thought, actually, it does. It needs to be somewhere. So the idea is the book really is for people that either are struggling with health conditions themselves or know somebody that is. And it's just really to bridge that gap to understand why trauma therapy could be really beneficial in your healing journey here, in your treatment plan.
Okay. Because I've heard, you don't understand how many times I've heard from people where it's like, I have gone to the doctor, including myself. I have
Mm,
gone to the doctor, I have this particular pain, and they don't know what is going on. Or they
yeah.
try to say, oh, it's just your head. I mean,
Mm,
women, unfortunately, have that more than most, where it's either with their body, with their hormones, and they're just not able to figure it out. So
mm.
is there a way where doctors can utilize people like you in their system and saying, okay, this may not be a medical condition. We need to refer you to someone who does trauma counseling to kind of figure out what is going on.
Absolutely. And I think there's more of that now. There's still a long way to go, but I think there's been so much noise around this subject, and rightly so, because so many people have unfortunately had their experiences dismissed.
Mhm.
And it's really led to a completely different quality of life, a really poor quality of life. And it's just not fair. And this is, I think, when you look at holistic healing, people don't necessarily understand what holistic healing is when done correctly. So it's that aspect of just understanding that there's a space for it. It's not an alternative in terms of, I think sometimes people are like, right, there's no medication and we just need to go into holistic
Mhm.
healing per se, but it's not that. It's working within the medical model and recognizing the limits of both systems to say, how can we lean on one another? How can we help one another? And what can we do there? So nowadays, people are learning through, I would say, people's lived experience. When people are now speaking, social media can be great in that respect, where people are saying, I suffered with this and I tried this alternative approach and it's changed and transformed my life. So it's more about raising awareness, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. And in your book, you talk a lot about the nervous system. Can you give us a breakdown on what is the nervous system and how does it play into our health?
Absolutely. Okay, so the that's a huge, huge
Yeah.
topic in itself. So I'll break it down in terms of what we're saying here. So the nervous system, I think it's just helpful to think of it like the brain of the body. Yep. So we're really conditioned in certain parts of the world to think that our mind does absolutely everything, and we really downplay the role of the nervous system. So when we're looking, and when I'm looking at the nervous system in the book, I'm talking about it from the perspective of the vagus nerve, and what that does for regulation and dysregulation in our bodies. So that regulation state, in the most basic way, is us in our optimal state where we're calm, all our bodily functions are in the right range for the body, and we're able to socialize and take in information. And
Okay.
anything outside of that is what we refer to as dysregulation, where the body has become distressed in some form. And it's not that we can't handle distress, it's that we shouldn't be living in distress or dysregulation long term. And I do believe, like, as a society, we have normalized dysregulation. There's a lot of things that make us feel dysregulated, but it can be glorified and sometimes even glamorized in society. So in the book, it's really about understanding your mind body connection. And of course, pain can really feed into dysregulation. And so if you just pair that with, everyday life, someone that's got pain and then emotional distress of some sort, your body's having a really natural reaction. It's speaking to you for help, and we want to resource correctly there and lean into the wisdom of the body.
Can you tell me what dysregulation feels like and what it is and what regulated feels like? Because a lot of times you hear that regulate yourself. Oh, you're dysregulated. But what does it look like in practice to be dysregulated? Because some people may be dysregulated and not know that they're living
Yeah,
in dysregulation.
yeah.
Can you
Yeah, absolutely. So I think when we're talking about regulation and dysregulation, we're talking, we can give like an overview, but it is a deeply personal experience as well. So I think the first thing to do is always check in with your body. There might be an overlap to how you and I feel regulated and dysregulated. But again, it's to check in with yourself. But regulation, like I said, it's if you're looking at it physiologically, so we're thinking about like heart rate, cholesterol levels, blood sugar levels, all of those things are within the right range for you and your body. And it's regulation is more likely that state of calmness there. There's not much activation happening. Yeah.
okay.
So you're not distressed, you're not experiencing necessarily lots of negative emotions or anything. It's that calm state of I can take this information in, I can engage in this experience. So in psychology, is in the book, I've got this image of the window of tolerance. Um,
You can show
and
us the
yeah,
image.
and it's that's the state there. So it's, I'll just bring it up. It's that, if you can see, it's a beach. Yeah.
Okay.
So we normally think of it, most people can relate to that state when they're on holiday or in their happy place. Yep. So if you're a beach person, it might be the beach. If you're a nature field, mountains. So some people, I've heard, especially if they've like moved from their home country, that original country is that space where they felt that. For others, it's an imaginary place that creates that state within your body of regulation. Um, what I would say, dysregulation is not an unnatural state. It's a state that we enter, it's a state that we can tolerate. There's benefits to that state. So, for example, when we're looking at fight or flight mode, that can quite literally save our lives in moments of danger. So, dysregulation is not unnatural. What's not natural is how long we stay there. Yeah. So, when we just to answer in terms of symptoms, for some people that can be the symptoms of stress, palpitations, feeling really mind fog, overthinking, restlessness, energy, withdrawn, numbness, all of those things that are just pointing to the body's not necessarily in that regulated space there. And again, none of these things are necessarily bad. It's just how much time are we spending there? Is that actually that our norm has now become living in some state of dysregulation, which will absolutely feed into chronic illnesses.
Mm-hmm. So I want to. So first, if I use myself as a personal example, because
Yep.
you work in a high, I work in a high stakes career in
Mm.
profession, and a lot of people, medical doctors, will, they work copious hours, especially in the United States, where they're working shift upon shift upon shift. So sometimes, to be honest, I don't even know when I'm dysregulated
Yeah.
until there's a physical symptom. So I may feel, oh, I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine, and then heart palpitations, like you just mentioned. So,
Hmm.
is there any way for us to catch dysregulation before we have those physical symptoms?
Yeah, so when we're looking at that, it's I would always start here by becoming an observer of your body. So before catching dysregulation, it's about creating moments of regulation when you can, because that kind of lets you know what regulation feels like. So that's your first indicator to know, oh, I'm not in this state, because regulation, it feels so nice naturally. So you want to stay in there, and it can be quite life changing in terms of you literally change your habits and who you're around and what you interact with, because it's taking you out of that state. So the
Mm,
first step is always to be regulated and to always observe yourself when you're in regulation. The second thing I think is, before we get to catching, it's observing, is to know, okay, that's interesting. When I went in that meeting, I actually noticed as I come out, I'm sweating a little bit, and I have got palpitations, and just noting that aspect, because once you can train the mind to start to observe these things, you'll become it will come into your awareness a lot more,
mm,
and then you do your exercises. So like at the end of the book, that talks about breath work, grounding, all of these body based exercises to bring you back into regulation. And the more that happens, the more you're able to catch yourself. But again, dysregulation is a natural thing that happens. So it's not something that we're trying to completely avoid all the time. It's just like we said, looking at how long are we spending there and how often. The question really is around how much of my day is being spent dysregulated, and
yeah,
what's the cost of that.
yeah. And let's go into trauma, because sometimes
Mm,
a lot of people have traumatic experiences, and
yeah.
they have had this traumatic experience when they were younger or many years ago. It could be grief, it could be assault, it could be whatever. How does that impact the body?
That is such a good question. In people, I think this is why we have to have an understanding of the nervous system in everything that we do, because a traumatic incident. I think first a definition of trauma would be just it's just really helpful, because I think sometimes people still associate trauma with extreme trauma, like war veterans, car accidents, robbery, and all of those things absolutely are traumatic, but that's not the only way for somebody to experience trauma. So trauma is an event that's happened that's overwhelmed your nervous system, the experience that you've gone through, and it's essentially changed the way your nervous system adapts to the world. So we've got defense mechanisms that have been built up from it. And how it affects the body there is what's stored, what emotion gets left in the body. And what is left there is, when you are engaging with the world in different ways, that can become activated. So
Mm,
I always say to my clients, emotions don't follow logic. So
mm,
when we try and say, okay, I don't know why this has come up. This happened 7 years ago. It doesn't matter.
mm.
It's within your system, and this situation has activated. 7 years is the Gregorian logical calendar that we use to make sense of time. It's not how the body processes those
Yeah,
emotions.
yeah, interesting. So we're
Mhm.
thinking of time as linear as what we see, but your body just it can't be stuck in a particular moment.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So when we're looking at trauma, we really need to look at ourselves in terms of our connection to the animal kingdom there, because when animals are traumatized, or when animals experience trauma, there's a lot to learn from them. They will scream and shake and be out in nature, and they will let that energy
Wow.
move through their body. And a lot of somatic practices can encourage that movement, because a
Huh.
lot of times what happens is the imprint of trauma stays within our nervous system. So the events past, we physically moved on in that linear sense, but that imprint lives within our nervous system. So if we are in a situation where we think it might be dangerous in a similar way, that will be activated, because the body is trying to protect us, it's trying to
Mm,
keep us alive. And the context could be completely different, and it might not be dangerous, but it feels dangerous. It threatens your felt sense of safety.
yeah. And I love that you said that because sometimes I would get like, just go, you need to scream. And
Yeah,
we try to bottle it up, but I think we need to have a safe place where we're checking with our body. What do I need now? Sometimes
what
you
do
need
I
a
need?
really good cry, and for no reason, you just
Yep.
like, I need to cry, and I think that's your body telling you we have something in us we need to let go. I
Yeah.
think bottling it up is what then is that what then transfers into health problems.
Yeah, so essentially we're looking at the connection of how does what's stored in your body emotionally and energetically contribute to your body's physical abilities there. And there's a real connection between that aspect of looking at, cells that are within your body. So if we're looking at things that you carry genetically, conditions that are genetically carried, and then they are activated, not because of anything other than the stress of the environment that you are living in, the dysregulation, for example, or the food and all of these things. So we're just looking at what's within the system and how is it being activated. So that connection there of conditions that you have, where actually the stress that's within your body, the energetic input that's within your body is contributing to the pain that you're
Mhm.
feeling. It's contributing to the inflammation that's going on. And it's contributing to your symptoms, and that's why the medication perhaps isn't working as well as it could have, or why you don't feel like anything is actually really changing. It just, you become stuck in this aspect or this new identity of this is who I am with this illness.
Hmm. So, what is the healing process like? The healing journey for somebody who's impacted by trauma, for somebody who's impacted by stress, and you're experiencing physical pain. What would you, if they come to you, what is the first things you do? How do you guide them through healing, the healing journey?
Yeah, so I think it's very different. It's always a case by case. It's always done on a case by case basis. So I think the key thing here is holistic. So there'll be, we as trauma practitioners, we're not medical, so they have a medical treatment plan in terms of pain management. There might be physio involved as well, for example. But what we would do is really look at regulation. Is what does that felt sense of safety look and feel like in your body? Just getting people to connect to your body. I think when your body is in pain or when you've experienced trauma that's affected your body and you don't have a loving relationship with it, you're not in touch with it anymore. And our bodies are always communicating to us. There's loads of different ways that the body communicates, and that's kind of that starting point. Is first, what does safety look and feel like for our clients, teaching them regulation, and also like, what is your body saying to you? When, how are we going to listen to the signals that your body is sending you, and start from there to create that safety and that aspect. And once people that, especially people that have chronic pain conditions, is once they start to work with the rhythm of their body and that regulation starts to take place, things tend to look a lot better on the whole. There's a lot more better days involved,
Mhm.
than just a back to back survival of let's get through the day.
And pain. So,
Yeah.
so do you then work with their medical practitioner, or is this something that is not connected yet?
So it really depends on how you work. So if you work in private practice in the UK, you probably won't be working with other medical practitioners. It won't be as jointed. But
Okay.
if you've got referrals and if you work with organisations that promote this service, there are few, but there are places. Then it would be a very joint up approach of everybody works together, and helps this client to reach their goals. But I would say at the moment, especially people that are working in private practice in the UK, it's quite disjointed right now.
Mm-hmm. And what are some of the reforms that you, as a practitioner, are hoping to see in you work in the UK space in the coming years?
I would like to hope that should somebody go to mainstream GP service, our medical service, and say, like the NHS, and say, look, this is the condition I'm struggling with, that their trauma history is considered there and then, so that they are offered as part of their treatment plan the same way. Like, I always compare mental health to physical health. So like, if you had a torn ligament or if you had something going on, physio would be an absolute, like, right, we need to get this in. I would like at that initial stage clients' trauma history to be acknowledged and somatic trauma work to be rigidly into that plan.
Mm-hmm.
So it's all happening at the same time, as opposed to people having years and years of going through things and just feeling like they can't get past a certain point because they don't, this information just isn't known mainstream.
Thank you for that. I know we're running out of time, but I also wanted to add, like, we live in a society where it's very much rat race and
Yes.
let's keep going, and we never stop to really assess the impact that
Yeah.
our lifestyles are having on our mental health and on our physical. Now it's not even just mental health, but I feel like when it's mental health, we still live in a very regressive society in the sense that it just forget about it, push through. But
Yes.
when it's all connected. So it's sometimes it's gonna appear in your physical health, and we don't want to be going around with chronic pain. What are some tips you give us to have a calmer, centered lifestyle?
Yeah, I think that point that you've just said is so, so valid. Like we say, like first the body whispers and then it screams. So if you don't listen, it will choose a time for you to listen that might not be convenient at
Yeah.
all. And I do understand. I think one of the things that we hear the most is I think a lot of people that are in chronic pain or in chronic stress, it's systemic. They have to work, they have to pay their bills, or for whatever reason, they have to push through. It's not necessarily a choice there. So I think for people that feel like, but I still have to get up and do X, Y, and Z, it's those pockets of grounding and regulation. It's to not underestimate what 5 minutes. I always say to clients, 5 minutes start 5 minutes in the morning, 5 minutes in the evening of breath work and connection. And
Mm,
then just ramp it up. Try and do 10 minutes. So that's just 10 minutes in the morning, 10 minutes in the evening, and then scatter a 5 minute break throughout the day regularly. That can lead to at least 5 or 6 moments throughout the day of regulation and connection there. And it makes the world of difference. Like our bodies are so strong and so wise in what they can achieve. Um, the more we can work with the rhythm of them, the better it will be. So if we find we're in a situation where actually our reality is not aligning to that, it's okay, how much can we do this? 5 minutes feels a lot more manageable than, right, I've got to do a 40-minute meditation or something like
yeah.
that. So it's small and consistent is better than nothing, is what I would say.
Can you is it okay if you walk us through some breath work that we can do in those 5 minutes?
Yeah, so I would say, so first of all, it's always important to check any contradictions here. So it's important to check medication, pregnancy, health conditions, all those sorts of things. But we're all breathing, we breathe all the time. So I would say a really simple breath, first of all, is to just observe your breath. So I always say, like, to sit down and put a hand on your chest, hand on your belly, and you just focus on the fact that you're breathing. So to just lower your gaze or close your eyes if it feels comfortable to. I get clients to put a 5 minute reminder on their phone or however long and put their phone face down. It's just zoning out of everything and just focusing on the fact that you're breathing. And the
Okay.
thing to observe here is that if the hand that's on your belly is not moving much, that's just an indication to take a deeper breath in and out there. So that breath is really circulating all the way down, and you're getting the full benefits of it. When we are slightly activated, we're in our fight or flight mode, that sympathetic nervous system is on, we tend to take shorter breaths, which puts so much strain on the
Oh,
chest and the upper body. It also sends direct signals that there's danger there. So the
okay.
slower the breath, the more that nervous system, everything just starts to relax. And it's as simple as that. If anyone takes any is the quickest way to connect back to your body and your nervous system.
Thank you. This has been fantastic. I have enjoyed this conversation so much. Thank you, Preeti, for coming. Can
Of
you tell us
course.
where we can get your book, please?
Yeah, it's on Amazon. So yeah, it's When Pain Lives in the Body. It's my website is it's thehealingpractice.co.uk. So it's available through there or Amazon. It's the way to go. So if you just type my name in with the book, it will come up. And yeah, anyone that reads it, we're getting people sending in their stories, which is just so great to hear. But any reviews, comments, all of those things, it's really helpful. We just want it to circulate in the right hands, those that need to hear it. If I could just really quickly add, it's written in a way for people that have chronic pain conditions. So if you look at the language, it should hopefully be really easy to understand and digest. It's not heavy in that respect. It's
Yes.
hopefully something that you just can keep coming back to. So yeah, hopefully it finds those that need them.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for your time and for coming on
Thank
the
you.
live. And hopefully we get to get hear more of you and you write more books, as we hope this one will be successful. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome.